make the public aware of what anabolic steroids will do to their bodies, to make young people aware that they are certainly putting their lives at risk because of the other side effects associated with taking anabolic steroids, and make perhaps government aware that unless we do something about restricting the movement of anabolic steroids, we can expect a continued rise in sexual and violent crime associated with that drug.
Steroid-induced anger, the so-called roid rage, recently cost little Samantha her life.
People don't realise how dangerous these steroids are. They have turned my son from a decent lad into a murderer. He has beaten to death a 2.5-year-old little girl, and I am devastated.
Brenton Byrne is now serving life for murder, and according to this expert witness, there's no doubt steroids were to blame.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. It may be amongst the first, but certainly won't be the last. It's about time that the law enforcement agencies and the medical profession actually open their eyes to the damage that these drugs do cause to society.
The steroids that fired the rage that killed Samantha came from India. We wrote to the factory and asked who could supply us in Britain. A Porsche in a hotel car park. A mystery blonde and her bodybuilding partner. These were the people put in touch with us by the Indian firm. The man said he was a dealer and user, mostly by injection.
Claws, thighs, quads, shoulders, delts, chest, everything. I've been involved with it. Because it gets to the point, like you said yourself, Scottish, you get so heavy.
He sold us £2,500 worth of steroids and offered much, much more.
There's always been that. It's like if you said you wanted 40 million quid to it, you know what I mean? If the money was there, you could have it. It's that simple. But if you've got to sell it.
They knew they were doing wrong and were nervous and suspicious.
What's its name? What's that one?
I've been looking at them already, don't worry.
And they were right without realising it.
What's the blade that goes down? What's his name? That blade's name. What's his name?
You mean you sit down?
We don't know who the mystery blonde is yet, but we do know who he is. Gareth Mackay, Major Cook. You were absolutely right. You were absolutely right. It was us who was selling. Mackay simply abandoned his gym at Leek in Staffordshire and disappeared. Pushers like him never take responsibility for what they do. Zoe Warwick was a top-ranking bodybuilder who says she had to take steroids to stay on top. And look at her now.
Physically, I got bigger, I got leaner, I grew an abs apple, my voice dropped into my boots, my genital areas grow, I stopped my periods, my breasts disappeared, you know. Mentally it made me very confused, very aggressive, psychotic. You know, there is no emotion in you. You could kill if someone just stopped you getting to your paper because, you know, steroid hunger. You get very hungry and you blow at little things.
Like other steroid abusers, Zoe routinely took from 10 to 1,000 times the medical dose. Her heart, liver and immune system now irreparably damaged. She keeps the latent violence under control, but others may not.
There's probably somebody going through a court now on a charge of violent behaviour as we're speaking, who's been taking these drugs. And because everyone thinks they're the domain of the top-class athletes, nobody bothers.
One goes down.
A small boy collects his gladiator stickers. His grandfather used to run a gym with his half-brother, Michael Van Wyck, who, under contract as the gladiator Wolf, used steroids and dealt in them. You just said you saw him selling to children.
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, he was due to go to Ibiza on holiday, and that time before he was famous, he called me over to the counter and he said, "What's this?" And my wife and I and my mother were standing there. And he called this young boy over and asked him if he wanted to look like him. And the boy said yes, and he said, well, I can sell you some steroids. And he sold it to him for £200. And my mother looked at him in disgust because of the boy's age.
You say you've seen your brother sell to 16-year-old kids and boast about enjoying doing it to get his holiday money. Yet he's on the record as saying he can't comment about steroids because he knows nothing about them.
Well, as I explained, he did actually sell them to kids. He has sold them in the gym to everyone else. And the only reason he won't comment on it is he doesn't want to lose his job.
And is there another one of Michael? Where is it?
But Michael may. Sworn statements from people too frightened to be interviewed support and amplify what his brother says. An expert in sports medicine, Dr. Carl Clinton, says that you can definitely tell a steroid abuser from his physique.
Generally, if you train excessively in the gym, you will reach a certain size, but to get the extra gains and the extra bulk, then you really need the abuse of anabolic steroids.
London Weekend Television said they took the gladiators on their honour, only contractually requiring them not to use steroids whilst the show was in production. Sadly, some of the gladiators seem to have let the side down.
Now, we were very interested when we were approached by the production team of the gladiators about the possibility of testing. And we said to them, well, this is all very well, but why do you want to test? And of course they want to test for public relations purposes. And we said, what are you going to do with the results of testing? And they said, well, we're not really sure. We said, are you prepared to act upon the results of testing in exactly the same way as the sporting world is? And they said, well, just a minute, we've got these people under contract. And of course that is a dilemma. And then you have to ask yourself if they're playing by the same rules as sport is.
So they weren't prepared to take the ultimate step and ban any offenders?
They're not prepared to do that. They're not prepared to play by the rules and to act in respect of results.
The producers' attitude saddened the Sports Council, which feared that steroid abuse was a growing problem, and they were right to worry. The Cook Report has carried out the first ever national survey of steroid abuse by school children. Out of the 10,000 respondents, 6.5% of boys and 1% of girls admitted using steroids. Projected nationally, that's a possible 100,000 teenage abusers.
My reaction to the numbers that have been quoted from the survey is one of absolute despair. This confirms my very worst fears. No longer are anabolic steroids restricted to a small number of people, a selected sample of people who are elite athletes, who are professional sports people, but they are now a recreational drug, and they are now available to children of school age.
And from India, we've now got the paperwork naming the illegal importer of the steroids we bought in England.
My name's Roger Cook. I'm here to talk to you about your steroid dealings. You certainly do. These Indian government papers give you as the importer of a large... Yes, they do.
Yes, he is. But because the law doesn't classify steroids alongside the likes of heroin, it's difficult to prosecute.
Of a very large quantity.
Well, at the moment you can get life imprisonment, up to life imprisonment for selling LSD and cocaine. If you're selling steroids, you're going to do more harm to people physically than selling either of them drugs. And I don't see any reason why dealers in steroids shouldn't get the same sentences, which is life.
And we have been buying this stuff that you brought in. You're responsible for this stuff. We bought this in schoolyards.
As it is, in a magistrate's court, Mr. Stiff will be fined £5,000 at most.
Doorways.
I don't know anything about that.
This has been implicated in all kinds of things, in deaths, in damage to people. It's been directly implicated in the murder of a little toddler.
Mr. Stiff is a bankrupt who nevertheless lives in a rather nice house. The business address on the paperwork turned out to be a derelict building in Liverpool.
According to all the documentation, the government documentation, the stuff that you import is implicated in the murder of a little toddler.
In Bombay, where the steroids are being legally made, they did know of Mr. Stiff, but didn't know he was selling their drugs illegally. Appalled by our evidence, the sales director agreed to cut off all supplies to Britain. One supply hopefully cut off, but many more remain from other countries. And there's still the problem of persuading youngsters that steroids are very bad news.
Right. Actually, yes and no. Muscle cannot turn to fat.
Those fighting steroid abuse have now taken the battle to the classroom.
They're two very different tissues, right?
How long would it take for some steroids to work on a person?
Well, you remember what I was saying earlier? That's why
People, he said, who were sacrificing life for looks.
it's pretty obvious that they're using something artificial, you know?
Graham Madison